The Prime Minister downplaying a warning from China's ambassador over Australia's defence spending. Joining me live for discussion is Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, Michael Shoebridge. Hey there, Michael. Great to see you as always. Now, you've read that piece and you say it's a bit like a wolf in a Red Riding Hood outfit.
Well, yes, I think Ambassador Xiao Qian knows that China doesn't have a good story to tell when it comes to regional security. He's as aware as anybody that the Chinese military is busily monstering regional countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. Maritime militias are massing in swarms in the Philippines right now, and that China's military is getting increasingly aggressive in its plans to invade Taiwan. So hearing from the ambassador that there's some China threat being hyped up by others, but China is lovely, is a bit like the wolf pretending to be Red Riding Hood's grandma.
I want to take you through some graphics that we did up about China's war preparations, because the tone on the ground, even when I was in detention, having to watch the state news every day, is very much about combat readiness. And we can show some of the things that Xi has done. For example, he's conducted over 30 inspections of army units and academies, and every one of them with full fanfare. So there's a lot of emphasis about training for war. And in fact, some of the soldiers say they have to, be every day is deployment day. What do you think of that?
Well, you're right. Xi Jinping has given directions to his military, the People's Liberation Army, the party's army, the Communist Party's army, to be prepared to fight and win at a moment's notice. He's told them his first priority is they're prepared to invade Taiwan and conquer it if and when he decides to do that. And meanwhile, we see similar kinds of aggression from China in Southeast Asia. So the only person that seems likely to take Ambassador Xiao's advice, unfortunately, is our Prime Minister. Mr. Albanese reacted to the ambassador's statements when he was asked today, is China a security threat? He couldn't even say the word. So, unfortunately, the Prime Minister's listening to these ridiculous propaganda lines from Beijing, and he's standing strong by poking America in the eye.
So what can Australia do in terms of managing this, not wanting the trade backlash from China, and then also needing our strategic ally, the US, but facing such a volatile leader as well?
A little bit of calm honesty would go a long way from the Prime Minister. Why on earth is he in AUKUS if AUKUS and those nuclear submarines are not all about deterring an aggressive China? We don't hear from the Prime Minister what the purpose of our alliance with America is, or that massive expenditure on submarines. He needs to be able to say both things. It's good to trade with China, although to diversify our trade would be smart. But we don't want to see more of China's aggression in the region. And Beijing's on the back foot here. At the big regional security dialogue, they couldn't even send their Chinese defense minister because they know they have not got a good story to tell on security.
Now, China says that it only spends 1.5% of GDP on defence. But what we know is that China has really increased its civil-military integration. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes. That civil-military integration is a core economic and security strategy. So, as a simple example, the shipyards that build the Chinese Navy's warships also build commercial vessels for China and for the rest of the world. So that very tight integration between their industries and their tech companies and their military means they're producing real military power, but their stated defence budget is a fraction of their real spend. There's a lot of off-book stuff, including the defence industry costs. And they also spend more on internal security, extremely heavily armed internal security apparatus, than they do on their growing...
As I full well know.
As you know.
So for countries in the region, how are they feeling about that, and to what degree should we be strengthening our regional partnerships?
Well, unfortunately, I think some countries in Southeast Asia have given up and decided they just need to live with an aggressive, dominant China. I think Cambodia and Laos are in that camp. But others like the Philippines and Vietnam, and of course the North Asian powers, South Korea and Japan, realize collectively with America, we can make conflict too costly for Beijing, but we're all going to have to lift our game, and we can't deny the reality of Chinese aggression. And that's the primary policy problem for our government.
So what sort of message should Penny Wong be sending at the Quad meetings in DC?
Well, Penny Wong will probably talk a far tougher game behind closed doors than ever passes her lips in public. And that's because she'll be in the company of people that understand what's actually happening with an aggressive China, and she'll be too embarrassed to stick to her public line. But what she says behind closed doors doesn't matter when the Australian government is underinvesting in our security and actively distancing themselves from our primary ally.
So we've now got the US asking us to lift spending. We've got China saying, don't listen to the US, spend more on your social services rather than your defence. How much should we be spending? Who should we be listening to?
Well, we should first of all listen to ourselves and realise that the current plans the government has for a conventional defence force and nuclear submarines cannot be afforded for the amount of money the government is putting towards defence. You cannot have a modern defence force and nuclear submarines for between 2 and 2.3% of our GDP. So we need to be spending at least 3, probably 3.5%, just to afford the defence force we've got on the books. And if we want to actually have things like drone and counter-drone defences, we need to invest in Australian companies, not the big offshore primes. And there's that simple saying, freedom isn't free. What a message if the Prime Minister fails to increase defence spending and listens to Beijing and not Washington about the threat.
Yep, a complex challenge. Thanks so much for your time. Wish we had more time to talk about this. Michael Shoebridge, Director of Strategic Analysis, Australia.